Hello, everyone, and welcome to my friend's place. I apologize for the odd background. There might be a dog or two that runs in here. I am dog sitting for a friend of mine while she's out of town. Speaking of being out of town, Thanksgiving is literally next week, and I'm sure it came up on you quickly. It tends to do that to everyone, and myself included, by the way. So here's how the end of the semester is going to play out, is kind of what I wanted to tell you. I will talk a little bit about what you've been reading for the past couple weeks because it might seem a little crazy to you. So I'm just going to put it in a broad perspective for you, and hopefully that will help you out. No one has emailed or anything saying this doesn't make sense to me or I'm not sure I understand. So I am just going to give you my overview just so that you have an idea of what I think is important from these readings for your exam. We have 3 major assignments left. You've got paper 2, which is worth 40% of your grade, right? So hopefully you have paper 1 feedback that will help you with paper 2. The second assignment that is coming along is your oral presentation. Now, I have heard from one person that it wasn't up. And so I went ahead a couple days ago and put it up again, and it still didn't show. And thankfully, that student was willing to work with me until I was able to get it out to you. I really hate Brightspace, and I have a feeling that over Christmas break, my job will be doing nothing more than trying to make Brightspace smoother for me and for my students. So good times are had by all, although I understand I'm not the only instructor who is having issues with this. We've been professors for a long time, most of us, and how many PhDs does it take to figure out Brightspace? The answer is apparently more than one. So I apologize for that, but it is up now. And thank you to that student for helping me out with that. And the instructions are there, and a grading rubric of sorts is there. When you read it, you'll know exactly what it is that I'm looking for. So if you have any questions about that, do let me know. Your final big thing for the end of the year is going to be your final exam. Once again, you will have a week to take this online open book, open note, open lecture, open everything exam. You could take it whenever you want during finals week. It is not comprehensive. I mean, in the sense that anything isn't comprehensive. I'm going to be focusing from, I think it was Bacon on, if I recall correctly. The syllabus is correct in what it says. And that will be, again, short answer or multiple choice, just like the first midterm. And then you will also have as much time as you want, but only one attempt at the test. So don't take it and then close it and go, oh no, I need to go back and change something. That won't work for you. If you are taking it and you say, hey, I need to take a break, just walk away from it. Don't save it and close out and everything. I don't think you can go back to it. So make sure that when you do go to do the exam that you have at least an hour, I would say, roughly, and you know your own pace. So make the time to answer those questions when you can. None of these things have to be done over Thanksgiving break. However, December 3rd is the due date for when your oral presentation must be uploaded. And I've been told the place to upload it does actually exist now, so that's good. Second, your exam will be over finals week. So you'll have that whole week anytime. So don't worry about that. And as far as your paper is concerned, of course, I would say it should already be done, but I wouldn't do that as a student for sure. But that is due December 5th by 11:59 p.m. So as soon as you get back, oral presentations due on the 3rd, paper due on the 5th, final during the week following that. Okay, I hope that helps everybody in sort of scheduling your workload over the course of the next couple weeks. So let's talk just for a brief moment about the craziness that you've been reading for 3 weeks. Now, for those of you who haven't been reading, I highly recommend that you read, because I may put a few of those names on there and you should probably know who they are, and what their main idea is, okay? So what is it that I had you read? After Toulmin, who was very clear, here is an argument model, you follow it, you don't follow it. And here's how you work with it when you are working as a rebuttaler. Here's how you work with it when you're talking in the public discourse. He was focused on a public discourse, and he gave us a very clean and clear linear model for understanding how argument works in the public discourse. And then we kind of blow that all up. And the theorists that you start reading start saying, ignore all of that, okay? Because language is about more than just making an argument, okay? Language is more than just using words for persuasion. Language creates things. Language is a rhetorical act. What do we mean by that? It's an act. It's not just words. It's an act. So whenever you say something, you do something. So if I were to say, hey, I really like the color purple better than any other color, what I'm saying is I am not as fond of pink, gray, green, and so on, right? So I'm not just telling you what is, I'm telling you what sort of isn't. That theory of the negative, as you know from the lecture, was invented basically by Burke. He was the first one to point that out, that, hey, we don't just talk about what things are, we define them by what they aren't. And a lot of times that's incredibly impactful. Is he the first postmodernist that we encounter? Well, he wasn't actually a postmodernist. If you think about Burke, he was actually extremely modernist. He had, the idea of how a book should be written or a play should be written or how a story should be told. He gives us a very linear way of looking at life as a drama, right? So he is still in that modern era. Postmodernism, we interrupt the normal sort of goings of things, all right? The normal status quo, the normal way of thinking, which of course is linear, deductive, and that's the only way to think, right, is with the scientific approach. We know better that there is another alternative way of looking at reality, and that is the narrative approach. And really, this is what Burke and others give us during that time period when he was writing in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. What all of them gave us, and I don't make you study all of them for good reason, trust me, what all of them gave us is this idea of the narrative paradigm, thinking about the world in stories rather than in strict argumentation, okay? So they're like, look, Toulmin, whatever, go away. You don't really understand the nature of human communication, which is to tell stories. Now, I happen to subscribe to both. I think we tell stories. I think we tell stories that are intended to persuade, and I think that we use evidence in those stories, whether it's personal experience or quotation from somebody or something we heard on a podcast or a radio station or something that we read. It doesn't matter. We use evidence, and every day we use it. Even when somebody says, hey, what time is it? If we don't have our watches on, we could look up at the sky and go, well, the sun's above my head and I can't really see it right now. Kind of makes it high noon, right? Or if somebody says, what's the weather like? I say, well, I look outside and it's beautiful and the sun's out and it looks like I just want to go frolic in the grass. However, when I open the door, it's very cold. So how is the weather? Crisp and cold. Right? So or clear and cold, I guess, would be a better descriptor, however you want to use it. Word choice then becomes so important to our narrative, especially when it comes to using evidence in our narratives, right? You might have noticed that I went from Burke, slipped into a little bit of Derrida, And now I'm going to talk about why those words are so important. Those words are so important because they create the status quo. And they create our position in the status quo. So there's certain things I'm in control of in my life, right? And certain things you're in control of in your life. When I do my work, how I do my work, what I choose to do, what I choose not to do, whether or not I'm stupid enough to go ahead and try to run a political campaign while I'm teaching, which, never to be done again. Can I just say that? But it was fun, but it makes life for me very hard, and I'm getting too old for that. So, but a choice that I made, and that choice was what made me empowered to choose what I wanted to do with my time and with my my intelligence and with my power in whatever way, shape, or form that comes. And now we're slipping into Foucault, because Foucault talks about the fact that language dictates our status quo, including the position of power that we have in the status quo. Probably, and I'm trying to think of an example to use other than like the Amendment 3 debate in Missouri. But that seems like a good one to kind of give you an idea of how this works. Part of the feminist movement, and now I'm getting into Six Sue a little bit, part of the feminist movement is based in this idea that language creates power in which men are, quote, over women. Men have power over women. That's the narrative. That's the story that we are given. The feminist movement says we need to be aware of how language does that, or how certain things do that. And most people say, well, it's just words, not a big deal. But again, remember, language is a rhetorical act, so it does something. Thus, we get into the Amendment 3 debate, where people say life matters, right? Great sentiment. Of course it does. I like to save cats, so apparently I like all forms of life. I'll even save a gerbil if I have to, right? Like love, I own lizards, okay? Not fond of worms. Love snakes, right? Of course, loving life is a good thing. That is the status quo. What happens when we start to evaluate one life or another? For example, in Amendment 3, it says that it is for life and that no woman should have the right to have an abortion. That's what the ban said. And Amendment 3 said, wait a minute, what happens to me, right? This isn't just about the life of the baby, this is the life of me, right? And if you've ever been in a position where you've known someone whose life is threatened by a pregnancy, you know this is very viable. Some of us have experienced it. Some of us have been there watching it. And so it's important for us to remember that this isn't just about a debate of do we ban abortion or do we not ban abortion? This is a debate about how we talk about life. The life of the baby, whether it's salvageable or not, trumps everything, including the life of the mother. That's what total abortion bans do. Now, we happen to live in an extreme state. The only one that was competing with us in extremeness was it Wyoming? Wyoming, North Dakota, or South Dakota. It was one. I just heard it this morning, but my brain doesn't work as well as it used to. Where a judge took a total abortion ban that they had that was very extreme and basically said, no, you can't do that. You cannot tell a woman what to do with her body. So what Amendment 3 was trying to do was to make that same argument. You can't tell a woman what to do with their body. What blocks us from having a good public discourse is that idea of, in the underlying, whose life is more important at that point. And, there's all these fine lines for how we might define that. There's people who say, well, as long as the baby's viable, that's all that matters, even if the woman doesn't survive. Which obviously, if a baby is viable, then deliver the kid or take the kid out and, do everything you can for them while saving the life of the mother. It always seems like there's a black and white, easy issue to this. But the way we talk about people making decisions about whose life is more important, that is where power and language meet. So it's not just about a public policy, it's about a public discourse. That's what's known as critical theory, okay? In this case, it's a power critical theory. It's a critique of power and language. For others, it's a critique in the power of the language of a certain thing. For example, marketing, capitalism. For some, it's a critique of ignoring, instead of just women, ignoring people of color, right? And we all know what that's called, critical race theory. And if you want to talk about that sometime, feel free to let me know. I won't go into it here because it's not part of what we're studying. It's a little piece of the kind of study that you might do if you were a critical theorist. How do we use language to hold power over people of color? Just like how do we use language to hold power over women? And a lot of times we don't realize we're doing it, but we do it for everything. How are we using language to create power over the impoverished, over people less fortunate than us, over people less intelligent, or by our own perceptions, by the way, or people who live their life differently, live in the margins in one way or another, be that the queer community, be that a person of color, be that a woman, be that whatever. We like to make judgments on it. But all of it in Western democracy, at least, in Western philosophy, is based off of the idea of a hierarchy in which man, literally men, people born male, have privilege over everyone else. Only if you're white. And that's something that I didn't really think about a whole lot. I mean, going through my life, I know that I'm incredibly privileged. I'm very, very lucky. I was raised in what would be considered a lower middle class family. I think I raised my family in sort of a more upper middle class, at least comparatively. And that's great. I am married to a man who literally is half German, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and he looks like what we would typically think of with the all-American boy, right? And my son looks the same way. Very lucky, very privileged to look that way. There were things I always thought we could do to change this. For example, if women would just educate themselves, if people of color were just given opportunity, if people who don't have money just worked a little harder. We have to think about all of those statements and what the language is actually doing. It's saying that people who are less fortunate than us don't work hard enough, which is ludicrous in a lot of cases. That people who don't have a formal education aren't as smart as us. That is just completely false, right? In fact, the more you move up with degrees, I'm going to say this as a PhD, the more you realize, I don't really know all that much. I'm not really that smart. I just can tell you where to find the answers. That's it. I've spent my life reading stuff, right? So that's all I can do is tell you where to find the answers. So we start to talk about groups, whole groups of people. And someone's going to say that's just stereotyping. And I understand what you're saying. We categorize everything. We really do. It's how we use the language of those categories in what we say. So critical theory is interested in power. Power. Critical theory is interested in power. Specifically, Derrida was interested in the power of the language. Burke was interested in the power of the narrative or drama. Foucault was interested in literally the power in psychiatry and psychology and sociology. I believe he had all 3 PhDs in that. So he has the qualifications and the credibility to speak to all of those, whereas I don't. And from Lakoff and Johnson, we learn about the importance of metaphor. How we make metaphor defines how we use language, which means power, which means the status quo versus change. So everything that you've been reading, Cixous looking at being a woman, and she's a feminist critique. Foucault is a power critique. Lakoff and Johnson are language critics. So is Derrida. And I think I even have you read one of the critics of race. Imagine that, right? I have you read these so that you understand where some of the debate in our public discourse comes from. It's not just from words. It's not just from policies. It's not just from one value or another. It's literally about what the language does. Okay? So, are there ways that we have negotiated incredibly difficult things? Absolutely. Have the way we talked about things changed? Absolutely. For example, I am extremely uncomfortable with the words abortion, euthanasia. Very, very uncomfortable. I'm also very uncomfortable with words like Aryan or Nazi or apartheid. I'm very uncomfortable with those words. I was raised to be uncomfortable with the word gay. I was raised to be uncomfortable with those words. And it's not until you understand why that you can understand how I can fix that, right? I mean, I'm obviously more comfortable with them now than I used to be because I'll say them, but it used to be that those weren't words that you used. It used to be that our politicians didn't use those words. Things have changed. Now, the question is, have we progressed? And the answer to that is we've changed. I don't know if it's considered progress or not, but we have changed. We have used language to do something. And that's what all of these theorists for the last 3 weeks that you've been reading have told you specifically how to do that. So, critical theory, it's the study of power through language, how it's constructed, how it's deconstructed, how it's used. Critical theory looks at how we categorize, marginalize, and sometimes flat out dehumanize with our language and how we can change that. But third, critical theory does not give us a solution. All it does is helps us become more aware of these language traps that we fall into. Even Foucault says, there's nothing you can do. You're trapped. But knowing you're trapped is good. I mean, I always thought that was somehow funny and ironic. At the same time, the one thing that was true in the 80s when Foucault was writing just before he died, that was absolutely true. None of us were paying attention to how our language constructed something. And now, that's what I've spent my life studying. What our communication processes actually build and how they're used to treat other groups, our view of the world even. My husband is allergic to the air. I swear to God he is. He literally, I made him come up to the cat rescue the one day, and I said, I just want you to meet one cat. Just come in. There's a very specific cat I want you to meet. And he said, okay, well, bring her out to the lobby because I'm not going in there. So he came into the lobby, and of course there's like 4 cats around him already, but he came into the lobby and I'm holding the cat. And I was like, don't you want to pet her? He goes, that's a cat. And I said, yes, it is. And he goes, do I want to pet the thing that might kill me? No, I do not want to pet the thing that might kill me. The way that I view cats is very different from the way he views cats. I mean, he doesn't say go out and harm all cats, right? But he definitely says, keep them over there. And he has his scientific evidence-based reason and experience-based reason for that. Whereas I'm like, get over your science, become emotional, or just think they're so cute, or value life. Do you not value life? And of course he does, but he is not going to work with cats and dogs and fur things, but he does help me with my reptiles. So I guess that's a good thing. When we say we value life, that is a construct that we need to define, sadly. And that is at the core of everything critical theorists are looking at. So I hope that helps a little bit in the broad strokes of what these critical theorists are trying to tell you. They are critical theorists. We call them postmodern because they break up the norm. And that's exactly what they want to do. They want to interrupt the normalizing of different kinds of power over different marginalized groups. All right, everybody, have a heck of a Thanksgiving. I am actually headed to Pittsburgh to see my family, Pennsylvania, the real Pittsburgh out east, to see my family for the first time. I think this is the first time in 12 years I'll have a Thanksgiving with them. So I'm very excited to have my mom's turkey. Honestly, she's a pretty good cook. Well, she was 12 years ago. I'm wondering if I'm just constructing it in my memory that she's a good cook. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll find out. Hope you all have a good one. And I'll see you on the flip side. December 3rd, make sure that your presentation is published. December 5th, make sure I have your paper submission. And the following week, take your exam at your own pace. I'll see you all soon. It's almost over. As always, if you need anything, email. If I don't respond, please text me or email me again. Okay? All right, everybody. See you not next week, but the week after.